I remember how excited I was to do the graduation ceremony where we move all the people in the assemblies, because all my sisters, my brother always talked about how fun middle school is, how fun Mountain View especially, just because like all the teachers, all the students, they just had something. It was always different. It was just different compared to the other middle schools.
Everybody was more like family. Not only was it the kids that the students that we had were families, we also created a family amongst our working staff.
We really had a really close relationship and did fun things together. Just the whole environment. I mean, I loved Mountain View. It was some of the best years of my teaching.
I fell in love with middle school kids. They're absolutely wonderful. They still have that innocent, and they're a little scared of you, but you know, they get my jokes. When I taught elementary, kindergartners just did not get my jokes. 7th and 8th graders got my jokes unbelievable. So
Everybody talked about Mountain View. We had the marching band that always marched from Mountain View to East Farms, and like that was just like a thing. That was just a really good thing that kept like the community together.
we had great kids there, and they did whatever I asked. So.
Every year was great because, again, we got along well. I can remember always every morning going to Jackie Peterson's class because she had the coffee made, and teachers would just go there and we'd have conversation and drink all of her coffee.
There was a ton of good pranks went on at Mountain View. All clean, all good fun. The kids got involved. I'd go into Mr. Smith's and open his back window and squirt the whole class down with the water guns and stuff. The other thing was a guy by the name of Dave Smith. He had to leave right away after school. He left his car keys out, so I hid his car in the shop. So he was looking for his car for over an hour and made him late for his appointment. So it was a lot of fun.
One thing I looked forward to more than anything was to wrestle for Mountain View, just because all the great high schoolers, all the great wrestlers that came out of East Valley High came from Mountain View.
Our wrestling program, which went undefeated for 17 years, never lost a match. They set a record nationally for that.
It was just the best coaching, the best teachers. It was definitely something I look forward to.
Those were some good memories.
And I always used to joke that we would sit on the steps of Mountain View in our rocking chairs, and we would be there until we were 80 years old. We knew that Mountain View was going to close because of the enrollment in the district was low, and we knew that they were going to have to close it down, but we weren't exactly sure of how that was going to look.
We were told we would be given an additional year, and then they pulled that out from us. So we really didn't have time to adjust, I don't think. So it was devastating because we were a close-knit group. We loved the kids there. Mountain View, it was just an amazing school to work at. We had, great administrator. I loved Mr. McAdam. We just all worked really well together. It was pretty devastating, I thought.
When they told us that we weren't going to be going to Mountain View, I felt like, in a sense, I was breaking apart from the legacy, if that makes sense. Like, because all my sisters, my whole family, everybody went to Mountain View.
But there was something special about the staff, and when they said they were going to close it down, it was hard. I mean, that was home. It was a great home, my second home.
So when we actually, when they made it final and the news came out that we were actually going to close, we were in a state of mourning. We were, the news was very involved in our closing. We had closing ceremonies. We had students that, oh crud, must have had students that came back from, they had to have been 28 years old. They were signing the Mountain View walls. So on Mountain View's gym wall, we have signatures from students. We had a huge assembly. We had a huge dance that we created, and we created a YouTube video. The news was there, and as the buses drove out that last day of school, we're all waving and crying, and so.
Mountain View was just always special. It was always just a place where everybody talked about.
I was the first 7th graders that attended Mountain View in 1979 when Mountain View opened. So I opened the doors to Mountain View in 1979, and then I closed them in 2011 as the athletic director. At that time, our superintendent decided that a K-8 model throughout the whole district was going to be the way to go. And being a middle school teacher, the hardest part about that is are your middle schoolers going to be ready for high school? Is it fair for these kids that have been in elementary school to not have the middle school experience?
It just seemed like they kind of just did things without asking us how we'd feel about it.
We did middle school and elementary, and we just made the best of it. We started off our 7th grade year, that group did, as in portables, and then we transitioned it back into the building when they were 8th graders, and I couldn't have had a better group than, I mean, it took us a lot to get used to each other and for them to understand what middle school was going to be like, because they'd only been in elementary and they'd never had that middle school experience.
At first on paper, it looked like a good idea, like, I guess getting us isolated just because like we were able to do our own thing, if that makes sense. But I don't know, it just kind of felt weird. It felt like throughout all this we were just kind of the guinea pigs.
Being thrown into an elementary school, going K-8, and students not being given the opportunity to have different types of classes and rotate and have electives like we had at Mountain View was difficult. I guess the schedule, because elementary was on one schedule, middle school was on a different schedule, so you couldn't collaborate with teachers. It was difficult, I thought.
8th grade, they put us at the end of the hallways again, and they opened up Mountain View for like electives, PE and music and band, which was nice. You know, it was all isolated, blocked off. There's like paint patches from people covering graffiti, and like even in the hallways and stuff, you could see like wiring sometimes, and you could see just like dents and like lockers and like just dust all over the floor, and it just kind of became like a museum artifact.
We figured it's been 8 years since we've been in this transition mode away from Mountain View. You look back on those things thinking that community and that family that we had, it's just, education's not the same for us with that transition. I mean, I'm an East Valley kid through and through, and I wouldn't want to go to a different district. So, you know, it's what we had to do.
The difference is I'll always be a Lancer deep down inside.
I mean, it's wishful thinking, but it'd really be nice if they could reopen Mountain View so that we could go back to the 6, 7, 8 model. I think having 6th grade in with the middle school helps them grow up and mature more, and they have more opportunities.
Life is like middle school. That's what I say to the kids all the time, is that life is like middle school. You always have challenges, and you always have to conquer them. And I think Mountain View was just, as a student for me, was my security. And then all of a sudden you just don't have that anymore. So I think that's probably the hardest part, is that just that, it was that security, that home.
It was just a great place to work. I'm glad I had the opportunity to be there for 10 years. I built some really good relationships, and it's nice to see those kids who come back and say, you know, thank you, and you know, we had good times there. So
When going through it, it did suck and stuff, but I do, in a sense, thank the system, because, like, this is a story to tell. This is something that I could definitely pass on to my kids. This is definitely something I could share with people and be like, no, listen, on paper, K sounds like a good idea, but middle school, that's what we missed out on, and I wish I had it. And it molded us to be who we are.